So here today, what I really want to talk about is I want to talk about 5 really simple habits that really can be implemented to, I think, almost anyone's life. And I'm reading this book on neuroplasticity right now and how important it is to get yourself in good habits, get yourself thinking in a positive way, because if you begin to really think negatively in whatever aspect of life that you're, I guess, venturing into, then you're going to start to believe that in whatever the case may be. And this is something that I really struggled with and didn't do well with in the past. It was things I would always be like, what's the point of doing this? I don't understand. This is dumb. I don't want to do this, etc., etc. But kind of like flipping a switch and almost retraining your brain, I guess you could say, just by doing that, it's going to make a really big difference in your mood. It's going to make a big difference in your output. And it's really going to help you change those neural pathways that maybe you have in your brain that have just been negative for however long that you've had this problem. And one thing I want to say before I start this video is I am going to start posting these episodes of just me that are like however long, 30 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever the case may be. I'm going to start posting them on Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well, because these are mainly podcasts that I've been doing. It's kind of just me talking and going over my thoughts on things I've learned, and stock market related things, how I'm thinking about the market, different investment strategies, all those different things. And the reason I'm doing this is because, like I just said, these are more of a podcast style videos now. They're not as creative as I was doing, because this just allows me to push out more content. And I do enjoy doing these a lot. Not to say I won't mix in the creative edits every now and then. Those probably will not be on Spotify and Apple Music, or Apple Podcasts rather, but the majority of them are going to be like this from now on, because I just flat out like doing these, and I just kind of like turning on the camera and just talking about things that I want to talk about. So we're going to keep doing that from now on. So make sure to go check us out on Spotify and Apple Podcast, and we'll still have our regular podcast every so often. We're going to keep trying to do those every week or every other week, having a different guest on. But yeah, let's get into this episode here. So the first thing that I feel like is a very important habit to implement into your life, and it's a very simple habit, and in this day and age, it's becoming more and more of a rarity that people are doing this because of social media and just feeling the need to constantly be around someone, constantly be busy, constantly to have something going on. And this first habit is to isolate. And this might seem a little bit odd to some people, because if you think of isolation and you think, at least this is the way I used to think of it, pushing people away, being by yourself, it's not good, it's not healthy, etc., etc., etc. But the thing is, when you isolate, and when you're not isolating, things are constantly going to be grabbing your attention, whether you're watching TV, maybe you're listening to a podcast, or maybe you're listening to an audiobook, or maybe you're on social media, or maybe you're talking to one of your friends on the phone, or maybe you're responding to email. The thing is, your brain is constantly saturated, constantly almost stimulated in a way. It's constantly grabbing onto stuff. And a lot of the times this is going to result in you just being exhausted, tired, burnt out, sometimes even frustrated. And what people don't understand is when you don't have that time to isolate and just almost be with your thoughts, a lot of the times your brain's really going to struggle to latch on to these different things. For example, I said this in the podcast I did with Nick. I have been living in this house for about a year and a half now, and I decided I'm going to start driving in silence just every so often to kind of reset, kind of do that dopamine detox, however you want to phrase it. And what I noticed is that by doing this, I started to notice things that I had never noticed around in my surroundings. So I would notice some different street signs. I would notice some different houses. I would notice different things that I had never noticed before, because I was constantly listening to a podcast, an audiobook, or, music sometimes, anything along those lines. And what I actually noticed, which is very interesting before I get back to, I guess, the habits we're talking about here, is, and I said this in the podcast, when I stopped listening to everything for a couple of car rides, I noticed when I went back to the audiobook or back to the podcast I was listening to, I was able to listen much more intently, and my attention to detail shot up. astronomically. So if you're really struggling to listen to anything in the car, or really in general, think about just going for a walk in silence and just being with your thoughts, or maybe just a silent car ride, or whatever the case may be. And come back to this and let me know if you tried that. And maybe it might not be 2 times for you. Maybe it'll be 3, maybe it'll be 4, maybe it'll be 5, maybe it'll be a few. But come back to this video and let me know if you tried that and kind of how that helped you, or if it helped you at all. Maybe everyone's different. Maybe it just worked out for me in some crazy way. But the thing is, when you isolate, building off of that point I said where I started to notice different pathways, and not different pathways, different things that are in my surroundings, your brain is going to naturally look for something to grab onto. So, for example, when I was driving and I was driving in silence, my brain looked for these different street signs. They looked for these different houses. They looked for these different things to grab onto. And I do this for a lot of things. If I'm really struggling to come up with an idea for a video, or if I'm struggling to find a podcast guest, or maybe I'm having someone on again and I don't know exactly how to structure the podcast to what we could talk about, and I mentioned this in the podcast with Nick as well, a lot of the times I'm just going to sit in silence. I'm legitimately just going to sit in silence. I'm not going to have the TV on. I'll put my phone on the other side of the room, or maybe I'll put it in my car or in the other room, whatever the case may be. I get completely rid of it. I don't open a book. I don't read a journal. I don't do any of that stuff. I legitimately just sit in silence and just stare into space. Sometimes I'll even go for a walk and leave my phone at home and just be with my thoughts. And almost every single time, sometimes it takes a couple of sessions. It doesn't happen all the time, but every single time, eventually, I come up with an idea, whether that is for a video or whether it is for a podcast guest or a creative, how to structure a podcast, whatever the case may be, because my brain is looking for something to latch onto. And when your brain is so stimulated and you're focused on all these things, you're focused on social media, email, TV, friends, whatever the case may be, your brain is very distracted and it can't just be with its own thoughts, which by default, I guess you could say, leads to procrastination on these things you're actually trying to come up with. And this is good for other things, even if you're not trying to be productive in a work aspect, let's say, or trying to film a video or script a video or structure a podcast, whatever the case may be. It's also really good to help you be reflective and to be objective and think about things that you're doing in your own life. Think about things like, are these things I'm doing today benefiting me? Am I reaching my goals? Am I helping myself do this? Am I growing as a person? Am I developing along the lines? And when you're busy, you're stimulated, it's very easy to just be subjective and put things off. Like, one thing I like to compare this to is personal finance. I think if a lot of people really sat down and really, who are struggling financially, whatever the case may be, maybe they're living paycheck to paycheck, maybe they're not financially literate. There's nothing wrong with that. Everyone has to start somewhere. Everyone has their own situations. And like I've said in so many different videos and episodes, like, financial literacy is just not taught. So why would you go and learn it if it's not something that is interesting to you and it's something that is essentially portrayed as unimportant? So you can make that argument with a lot of things. I think personal finance is one of them, but hey, you know what? That's just me. But anyway, when you're subjective in this sense, maybe it is to personal finance, it's very easy to think this is how it is, it's going to be okay, it's all right, and just completely disregard it and move on, rather than actually sitting down and thinking along the lines of, how can I get myself out of this bad financial situation? How can I put myself in a better financial situation? What can I do to increase my income? What can I do to lower my debt? All of those things. And it's very hard to have those complex thoughts, those reflective thoughts, those objective thoughts to actually say, I am in a bad financial situation. And this can be for a lot of things. This isn't just finance. This can be for tons and tons of different things. But if you're sitting by yourself alone with no other distractions, your brain's going to go down that rabbit hole. And finance is a very good example for this because it's something a lot of people don't like to talk about. It's something that is extremely important, and it's something a lot of people don't even want to think about because it stresses them out astronomically, for good reason, because money makes the world go round. And if you don't have income, you don't have money, then it's very very stressful. It really is. Anyway, to summarize there, to kind of make more sense of it, if you're struggling in one way or another and you kind of know it in the back of your head, but you can't dedicate the time to really sit down and think about it, try just sitting in a room by yourself or going for a walk and just almost reflecting. No distractions, because your brain is going to try to latch onto those things, and you're going to find out that you're going to be a lot better off in developing a plan for whatever you're trying to get better at, or for whatever you're trying to be objective and reflect on. I do this with my own goals. Like I said, I do this with YouTube stuff. I do this with podcasts. I do this with podcast guests, structuring podcasts, all those things. I just kind of sit and think, and my brain will go to more creative ways that I don't think it would be able to go to if I was watching TV, or if I was scrolling through social media, or if I was talking to a friend or on the phone, or whatever the case may be. You can use your imagination. And then what I try to do is I try to write these things down, and it sticks in my mind even better. So if I decide I want to be better with personal finance, let's say I decide I want to cut back on my spending, I want to get out of debt, whatever the case may be, just for example, I'll go for a walk and I'll think about this. And when I get back, I'll start to write down a plan and brainstorm different ways I can go about this. And I feel like by doing that, I'm much more likely to stick to it. So go ahead and try that, because I feel like people can learn a lot by isolating. Bill Gates has this thing, which I'm sure everyone has heard of, called a think week, where he essentially just goes and isolates himself for a week from everyone and just thinks. And I thought this was the dumbest thing for the longest time. I've heard this for years, and I thought it was legitimately crazy, until I started to spend so much time by myself and really start to think. I realized it was actually genius. So I think I'm really considering actually doing something like this along these similar lines myself. Maybe not an entire week, but maybe just take a weekend and drive to the mountains or something somewhere in New Hampshire, and just essentially be by myself and leave my phone in the car and just explore and think. So the second habit up on this list we're going to talk about is actually minimalism. I'm trying to make these different that I haven't talked about before on the channel and that aren't overly cookie cutter. So minimalism has a lot of benefits, like lack of clutter. You're saving money because you're not spending as much money, obviously, on materialistic items that you don't need, etc., etc. But I like minimalism for different reasons in addition to those that I just named. So it also limits your distractions. For example, if you have a desk, right? You have a desk where you work from home and you have papers and books and headphones and all of these things on your desk. Maybe you have an iPad and your phone's there. It's actually proven that that's going to be a lot more distracting to you. Unless, of course, you're taking notes out of a book or you're writing notes on like one of those notepads on your desk. That's a different story. But if you're just having stuff there, it's proven that your brain's going to latch onto those things, and your brain's not going to have as clear of thoughts, and it's going to be harder for you to focus and be productive in that sense. So that applies to also materialistic items. If your house isn't clean and organized and you just have stuff lying around everywhere, it's going to be much harder for you to stay organized mentally as well. Another thing it does is it limits distractions. So, for example, say you want to buy an Xbox. Now, if you're a big gamer, you love video games, maybe this is not the example for you. But say you're thinking, I kind of want to get into video games. I kind of want to start playing Xbox or PlayStation or whatever system that you're interested in. PC, use your imagination. Think of it this way. I like to think of it this way. Do I need this? Do I need to implement this hobby into my life? Is this going to help me reach my goals? Which this might build off of another habit we're going to talk about in a minute here. But is this really going to help me reach my goals? Do I have time for this? And for me, especially because I don't play video games and I've thought about this in the past, the answer is no, because buying an Xbox and playing it, even if it's just an hour a day, is not going to help me personally reach my goals. Again, if this is something where you want to use it to relax, if this is something where you do it to wind down or just turn your brain off for an hour at the end of the night, maybe you don't like to watch TV, maybe you don't like to read, maybe Xbox is your wind down time. That's your fun for the day. Completely different scenario, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But for me, I just don't find it overly beneficial. And this applies to a lot of other things and a lot of other materialistic items that you could buy. They're just essentially distractions at the end of the day that don't help you really achieve the goals that you want to achieve. And by cutting back on these things, like I've said earlier in the video, A, you're going to save money, B, there's not going to be as much clutter, C, you're going to be more organized, and D, there's not going to be as many distractions. I know some people that are so focused on what they're doing, they legitimately pick up everything and move to a place by themselves where they don't know anyone, which is actually something I'm entertaining the idea of doing over the next couple of years, but that's a topic for a completely different video. I'm actually going to look and visit some places this year and in the future to check out and apartment hunt and all those things, but that's a completely different story. I know some people that completely get rid of their TV because they love sports or they love watching TV, they love watching Netflix, and they just get rid of it so they don't have that temptation. So the less you have, the more productive you're going to be and the more output you're probably going to see at the end of the day. I also enjoy minimalism because it goes back to that hell yeah or no theory that I've talked about in so many videos. I'm not going to go into super detail about it because I've already done that a number of times, but basically to reiterate really quickly, in life you want to say hell yeah or no to everything, and by doing that you're going to leave time, resources, finances, whatever the case may be, for the things you really want to do. And because you've cut out on the things you don't really want to do, you can afford to do the things that you really want to do, whether that's mentally, financially, whatever the case may be. So you want to say no as much as possible until you find something you're like, hell yeah, let's do it, let's go, run it. I have other videos that talk about that, so I don't really feel the need to go into too much detail like I just said. But by saying hell yeah to these material items that you want, then you're going to really get the ones that you really, really want and the ones that are really going to bring value to you. And they're not going to be those things that just you use for a week and you essentially never use again, kind of like some toys you might get as a kid for Christmas. So the third habit that we're going to talk about on this list is reading and taking lots of notes while you're reading. So people that know me well, they know I read a lot, whether that's SEC reports, books. I read and consume a lot of information on a daily basis because I try to be as productive as possible. Like I said earlier in this episode, sometimes I need to take a break and just sit in silence or whatever the case may be. I feel that's beneficial, but that is besides the point. But I read a lot of books. I've read about 20 books so far this year, and we're in the first week of February at the time of me filming this. So I really want to read 100 books this year, which I should shatter that if I stay on this pace. And that's the most amount of books I've read in the shortest amount of time, that 20 books. If I hit 100 books 6 months in, my mind is legitimately going to be blown that I blew that goal out of the water. Granted, I do listen to half of them on Audible, and I do read the other half with physical books, but that's besides the point. I still count that. Whether you agree with that or not, that is up to you to decide. But I found by reading so many books in such a short period of time, my mind is almost a lot more clear. I guess you could say there's not as much clutter in my mind. I feel like it's the weirdest thing. I feel everything's almost moving in slow motion. I feel like I pay attention to things a lot better. I feel like my responses to questions are much more intellectual. It's really bizarre. I don't know if it's because of the stuff I'm reading or if it's just because I'm reading in general. And it's absolutely crazy, and I love it because I feel like I can sit down and really give a very in-depth opinion, even better than I could before, on different things when people ask me about different topics. And I love it at the end of the day. And books are always something I felt that could bring you back to the present moment. And I always felt like it's something that everyone should do because when a lot of times, a lot of people compare this to meditation. They say meditation really brings you back to the present moment, and I think it does, and I think every single person should meditate. I really think that is a really great idea. I thought meditation was bogus for the longest time until I tried it, and now I think it's actually fantastic, and I don't see any reason why someone can't meditate for a couple of minutes every single day, but that's besides the point. What books do in a similar sense is if you're listening to an audiobook, music, a podcast, watching TV, it's very easy for your mind to wander. At least I have found sometimes. It's very easy for your mind to wander something that's going on for work. It's very easy for your mind to wander something that's going on in your personal life, whatever the case may be. But what I have found is by reading a physical book, or whether it's on a Kindle or whatever, you really have to put all of your energy into the words on the page, because otherwise you're really wasting your time, because you're not going to comprehend anything that's in that book. You make the same argument with TV shows, you make the same argument with podcasts and audiobooks and all those things. But I find it's much easier to kind of push all your thoughts aside and really just focus on the words on the page. But what I've also found is really helpful, in addition to reading all of these books, is taking notes on different, lessons, different life lessons that I have found in these books. And even if you're a fictional reader, you can definitely still learn a lot of life lessons in fiction books, fantasy books, whatever the case may be. And I found by writing these down and taking notes on them, it's really good, because if you just take notes on the very, very, very important lessons in that book, at least for me, I'm going to remember them, a lot of them at least, and I'm going to apply them to my life in a lot of different ways. And I'm going to at least try to apply them. And when I do, if I like them, I'll stick with them. If I don't like them, I might just throw them out and get rid of it. But I found that by doing this, my life has gotten a lot better, and it feels a lot more productive, and it feels really, really good that I'm trying these different things. One example here, when I first started reading books several years ago, and I mean reading books for fun, I don't mean for school or work or anything like that. When I first started reading books for fun, one of the first genres, I guess you could say, I started reading was finance books. And I started to take these notes on personal finance, Roth IRAs, the stock market, and I started to apply all those lessons I learned about those topics to my life. And obviously, I've learned a lot about personal finance, and something I'm very passionate about now, and it's made my life a lot better knowing I don't have to worry overly, I guess. I guess there's always some sort of worry for everyone, but I feel a lot better knowing that I'm going to be in a lot better financial position now as I continue to invest and I continue to look for opportunities to put money in different places, that my financial situation is just going to get better over time. And I don't have to stress out about being 50 years old and not having a retirement account or anything like that. And again, if you're watching this, there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't make you a bad person. Like I said earlier in the episode, finance is not taught in any way, shape, or form in schools in a lot of cases. But another example is with productivity books. When I read books like The 4-Hour Workweek, I took a lot of notes on that book and how I could have more time and how I can consider outsourcing things. How I can batch things together to give myself more time and focus better on all these different things. And I feel like I said, by doing this, you're really going to feel a lot better as a person and overall, that you're trying to make these changes to make your life better. And I've said this in different videos before. I think books are one of the best things in the world, because you're essentially taking someone's life's work and you're narrowing it down to a few hundred pages, and you get everything that they've worked on, everything that they've learned, everything that they've studied in just a few hundred pages. Now, the fourth habit we're going to talk about on this list is discussing ideas. Now, I feel like when you go out with your friends, or at least this is in my situation, a lot of people just flat out complain, which I don't like. Obviously, there's going to be some things in your personal life you need someone to talk to, whatever the case may be. You just need to get off your chest. But I feel like a lot of conversations these days are just complaining, and people don't discuss ideas enough. So some of the best ideas that I've ever had have come with discussing them from other people. Like this idea of starting a podcast, it literally came from a discussion of just bouncing ideas off of my friend Nick. And I wish more people were open to discussing ideas, and it doesn't even have to be business related. I know many people that have improved their health over the past few months, the past few years, just by discussing different resources of how to learn about health and how to maximize their time and how to just get better and feel better overall. So instead of complaining, maybe it would be better to just try to talk about some ideas or try to pick someone's mind. Maybe start to think about something you learned in a book or something you even learned at work. Maybe if you learned a data language at work, maybe talk about why it's important and why you are excited that you learned it and how you can apply it to every single job that you have from here on out if you decide to move on from your current occupation. Try thinking about that, even if the person isn't a big fan of it, because I'm sure if you start to talk about something, some people are just going to be like, yeah, whatever, dude, I don't care. But a lot of people are actually going to be interested in it, and they're actually going to start asking you questions. And I think you're going to be surprised at the number of people that really care about the things that you're going to talk about. And what you're going to find is when you latch onto the right people who are also talking about great ideas, is it's going to make you more valuable. People are going to want to be around you more often. Like I said, some people are going to be like, yeah, man, whatever, I don't care. And they're not going to provide, I guess, an equivalent amount of value in return, which is completely fine because maybe those aren't the people you want to be hanging around with. I know I have a lot of people that I was close with a long time ago and I'm not overly close with now because I just felt like the value of me hanging out with them was not a good ROI for my time. It was a lot of complaining. It was a lot of misery. I didn't feel like it was helping me grow. So although I'm still friendly with them, it's not that I don't like them, but I'm not hanging out with them every single weekend or all the time like I was before by any means at all. And another thing it's going to do is it's just going to make you more likable because although everyone needs someone to talk to at some point or another in their life, I believe, no one likes someone who's just complaining every single time for years on end, which it does kind of get annoying that you are just, everything is wrong, the world is against you. No one likes a Debbie Downer like that all the time. So try discussing ideas, and it's really going to open your eyes to new things, new pathways, different things that you've been missing out on that maybe you never even thought of in the past. So the last thing we're going to talk about on this list, and something that I feel like is extremely important and it can provide a lot of success and a lot of value in your life, is if you're really passionate about something or there's something you really want to do, double down on it. So I feel like a lot of people, and I've been guilty of this, I've been very guilty of this, what they want to do is they want to learn habit A, they want to learn habit B, they want to learn habit C, they want to do habit D, they want to do all of these things, and they want to have all these skills, and they want to make them all hobbies, and they want to get really good at all of them. But the problem is they just physically don't have the time or energy to give enough energy to one single hobby, one single thing to get really good at it. So in my case, a lot of the times I want to run a marathon, I want to get pretty good at jujitsu, I want to still go to the gym, I want to research stocks, I want to run this YouTube channel, I want to do all these things, but sometimes it's very hard for me to give the energy I need to get really good at these things. And what you're going to find out is if you just double down on one or two or just a couple of these things and give more energy towards that, it's going to be a lot, I don't want to say easier, but you're going to be more apt to get good at that at the end of the day. For example, Tom Brady, the greatest football player to ever walk the planet. Imagine if for the last 20 years he was not doubling down on football, and instead he was giving half of his energy towards, or a quarter of his energy towards basketball, a quarter of his energy towards tennis, a quarter of his energy towards baseball, and a quarter of his energy toward football. He probably wouldn't be the greatest quarterback ever, and he probably wouldn't have been in the league nearly as long as he was. But because he put so much effort into football, he was able to accomplish that goal and become great. Same thing with Tiger Woods. Imagine if Tiger Woods spent a third of his time playing golf, a third of his time researching stocks, and a third of his time running and training for a marathon. He probably would not have become as good of a golfer as he was. So what I think would be really beneficial is to make a list of the things that you want to do and then prioritize them and just pick the top couple that you want to get really, really good at, and then devise a plan on how you're going to get really good at them. And you're going to find that you're going to have more time to divert to these things. And it doesn't mean you have to completely forget about the other ones at all, but maybe just don't prioritize them as much and make them just casual hobbies here and there, rather than something that you're doing every single day or every single week or even every single month. And the thing is, when you're doing this and you're making this list, try to be responsible and make healthy decisions. At least that's what I try to do. For example, if I say I can either go out drinking on the weekend or I can research stocks, which one's going to benefit me more? Most likely the researching stocks answer. Not to say you can never go out with your friends at any point and have fun, but if I have to pick one to focus on, going out with my friends every single weekend or researching stocks, the researching stocks one's probably going to benefit me more for my personal goals in the long term. Obviously, that's your decision. It doesn't make you a bad person. You have to decide on what you want to do. But anyway, guys, that is going to be the end of this episode. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure to comment, like, subscribe. Anything you want to see from me going forward, make sure to comment that down below, and I will take a peek at it. Thanks again, guys, and until next time.